So when I was conducting my research, I drew on a model which examined parenting styles, and this was by somebody called Diana Barmrind, who talked about 3 different parenting styles. So there was authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. So I use that in my research, and I do recognize that it's not always easy to categorize, but from what my analysis was saying, this was the best approach to analyze it. And some of my respondents indicated that they'd had an authoritarian parenting style, whereby the parents were very strict, they had very high expectations of them, there wasn't so much flexibility over certain things, lots of emphasis on discipline. But whereas others had had a more authoritative parenting style, where things were a bit more flexible, there was more sort of agreement in terms of rules and regulations, but then they also had high expectations of their children and their academic outcomes, but none of them were permissive, none of the parents were permissive. But in both cases, the children or the participants came out very well academically, and also in terms of their professional attainment as well. Again, there are pathologic or negative ideas about the way in which Black parents raise their children. And the dominant idea is that they use an authoritarian approach which restricts their individuality and really has a negative impact on the children's behavior, which translates into the education system. So a lot of research tends to reaffirm this, but I'm arguing that actually this isn't necessarily the case, because not all Black parents do use an authoritarian approach. They may be more flexible or authoritative in their approaches. And also, even if they do use an authoritarian approach, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because what this does is enables the children to develop discipline in other areas of their life, their academics, when it comes to just reaching goals, etc. So I'm challenging this perception in my research, and I'm arguing from personal experience, and also from the people that I'd spoken to. A lot of them were saying that they'd had this authoritarian approach, and yes, sometimes they resisted against it, and they didn't always like what was said and the way that things were done, but at the same time, this benefited them, and this has helped them academically and in terms of their careers. But for those who didn't experience it, again, who had an authoritative approach whereby the parents were more flexible, they gave them more autonomy, but they still had high expectations of their abilities, they did just as well as those children who'd experienced an authoritarian method. If anything, the authoritarian children did better because of that extra discipline that they had.